Assalamu alaikum and welcome to The Conversation with me, Talha Ahmed. Today we'll be discussing about impact of COVID-19 and response to it. And we will be focusing on Newham. We have a very important guest to discuss the challenges that we face in Newham in particular and how those challenges are being addressed. But before I introduce her to you, may I remind you that this program is for you. We aspire to address your concerns, to raise your voice and to articulate questions and comments that you may have. There will be no exception to this, and therefore please feel free to join us. Although we will not take calls in the first half of this program, we will try to take some calls in the second half. So if you do wish to ask a question or raise your concern or make a comment, please feel free to call us, and the number to call you will see on the screen from time to time. Those of you who are not able to continue to watch this program on TV, or if your friends and relatives are not able to watch this because they may not have Sky, you can invite them to watch it live on our Facebook page now, or at a later stage at your convenience you can watch it. And to do this, you'll have to go to our Facebook page, TV1 UK. TV1 UK Facebook page. You can watch this program now and at a time convenient to you. So without further delay, I will introduce my guest. But first, may I remind you that today we are interested about Newham's experience of dealing with COVID. We want to know how badly it has affected things in Newham, the lives, businesses, community, individuals, young people, all sorts of people. We are interested on your story. We'll also hear about how people in Newham, businesses, community organizations, mayor, her administration, how they have gone about to address this challenge. And so we'll hear from the mayor of Newham about her struggle to ensure safety of people in Newham. But also we'll hear from business leaders, from community leaders, and indeed from sports organizers to share their stories as to what are the concerns that they have been grappling with. So without further ado, I introduce to you our guest in studio today, Rukhsana Fayez, Mayor of Newham. Rukhsana, welcome to our show.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
We are also joined by Asif Chaudhry, who is a trustee of Forest Gate Mosque. Asif, welcome to our show.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me.
And we are also joined by Mohammed Atikur Rahman, who is the treasurer of London Sportive. Mohammed Atikur, welcome to our show.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for having me on this program. Thank you.
Rukhsana, if I start with you, Newham has been a very challenging place in so many ways, and I don't mean to say it in a negative way, but we have had severe poverty, there's been health inequality, issue with employment, housing, all sorts. And COVID-19 also put Newham in spotlight because it has the second highest death rate from COVID-19 in the whole country. Do you just briefly want to tell us how severe or serious the impact of COVID has been?
Thank you very much, and a very important set of questions, and you're absolutely right. There has been long-standing issues relating to health inequality, poverty, deprivation, and these are things that for a very long time national government has known has a disproportionate impact on those areas in the country where these characteristics are rife. So that's number one. It's the reason why we've been affected particularly badly here in London, albeit for a period we were very much the top ranking local authority in the country with the highest COVID-19 mortality rate as a consequence of our deprivation. It's not a top ranking feature that any local authority, any leader would be proud of or would want. That was for an early period of the COVID-19 first wave pandemic, and it tells a story about the way in which national government approached the early stages of the pandemic, which are well known. The issues of poverty and inequality have absolutely brought into sharp focus how disproportional our community has been impacted. We presently, in light of the early stage of the second wave, are second in London with 70.1 cases per 100,000. First is Redbridge, and we have put in a lot during the first wave to protect as best as we can, working collaboratively with the community to keep people safe, and that requires all of us to work together.
I mean, isn't it interesting that Redbridge is seen as slightly, relatively more affluent compared to Newham, and yet you are trailing them? I mean, it's still bad, but is there something that you're doing, perhaps that made you, because your population are BME, more than half of the population, who are more likely, disproportionately more likely to suffer from COVID-19. You have severe housing issues. Overcrowding is a big concern in this borough. And you have people who work on relatively lower paid jobs where they are more exposed to be contaminated. So is there something that you're doing? I mean, second is still worse, is concerning. But the fact that you're trailing a borough that one would have probably expected not to do as badly, is there something that you're doing that's perhaps working?
I think there has been something very special that we have done as part of a Newham Council and community-wide response, and we were very clear from the outset that we knew that COVID-19, during that first wave pandemic when it hit the UK, we would be affected badly because of those pre-existing characteristics of deprivation, poverty, health inequality. You rightly point out just the situation with regards to the housing crisis. We've got a significant number of our resident population living in multi-generational households, and we have a workforce that services a significant part of the London economy, and they have to travel and they can ill afford not to work. I think what we have done through that collaborative effort during that first wave has put us in a better position. And believe me, I am no way at all suggesting that there are things that Redbridge have done wrong. I think we have had a general challenge across London, across the country, around compliance because of the mixed messages coming from national government. And what we've done here in Newham has been a collaborative approach with our residents, with the voluntary sector, with the faith communities to build up a network of COVID-19 health champions who are residents, leaders in their own right, who are able to convey those really important public health messages. So there is likely to be a deeper understanding and compliance, albeit there are real challenges. The rule of 6 is problematic on so many levels for everyone.
And there are plenty of families which are larger than 6.
And we've been very much ensuring that our communications, have been in multilingual languages because of the diversity of our population. We've got 240 languages and dialects spoken. And you're right, we were acutely alert to the challenge of COVID, but also the devastating impact because we have 75% of our resident population that's ethnic minority. We are doing our best in a very challenging situation that is challenging everyone, including Redbridge. And Redbridge, despite its rate, I know that the leader and the council and the public health team are in unity with the rest of London to ensure that we keep levels low.
We had them a few weeks ago and we explored. But one of the things that we will focus specifically on some of these issues more specifically, for example, housing, education and young people and employment. We'll come to those. But does it concern you that as we begin to see the sharp rise, what many call second wave, that we are seeing how shambolically the test and trace has been managed? And are you concerned that it may have adversely impacted your own work here in Newham?
We have constantly, as local government, Newham is part of a family of local councils in London across the country, have challenged the national government that its national test and trace system needs to be very much anchored in the local. The disinvestment that has occurred over the last 10 years with regards to public health investment is very evident and is well known, and we have made sure that notwithstanding the national test and trace system, we've put in place where we can, working with our primary care partners, our GPs. We've ensured that we've got testing centres, we've ensured that we've deployed our network of community representatives, COVID-19 health champions to convey those messages. We've made sure that we've prioritised care homes, we've put in place as part of our own localised system, elderly residents that are being sent to...
My concern is more about, we know that tens of thousands of test results have been either misplaced or not improperly recorded. Do you have, or have you been provided with any information whether this affected people in this borough?
So we have, after a prolonged period during the first wave pandemic, pushed as local government in London and elsewhere for government to provide us with up-to-date data. So we get Pillar 1 data, which is hospital, COVID-19 cases, and we also have Pillar 2, which is community test cases. The issue with testing capacity has highlighted the deficiencies of the national system, because it's highlighted a number of things. One, it's highlighted how ill-prepared national government was. It's highlighted the flawed strategy that they've pursued in terms of a national regime, as opposed to ensuring that you've got robust local test and trace, and that's what we've been arguing. And what we've done is to fill that gap without resources, but what we've also ensured is that during the period, and there was a period where government itself diverted the testing capacity for London outside of London because of the concerns in the north of England, we lobbied the government to say you cannot let London remain exposed. So testing capacity is coming back. This week we've piloted a new testing centre. We've already have one in East Ham, a Walk 2 centre. We've got another one that's been opened yesterday in Beckton, the south of the borough, and we're pushing Public Health England to introduce 2 more, because a lot of this is managed by the national system, and clearly we have got to ensure and make the case that because of issues of our vulnerabilities and risks, because of our characteristics of our population, high ethnic minority, we are most at risk, and we demand, and we've received additional testing capacity. But part of what the challenge has been is when you have a national system that operates at both local, regional and national level, they are managing the constraints of supply in a high demand situation. That's what the problem has been, and we know that Matt Hancock has said it's going to take some 6 weeks to the end of October to retain and get back to that testing capacity that we all need. And my worry, as is the worry of other London leaders and the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, is that we will be seeing increased rates of transmission, and that's the reason why that outside of testing capacity, we're not relying on testing capacity and test results alone. We're looking at other different metrics in order to measure the trajectory of the COVID-19 transmission in the capital.
So one of the things you mentioned is how you have sought to engage community organizations. But one of the weaknesses that we have known in this area is lack of capacity within the civil society. Your appointed commission also identify issues. How have you sought to support them so that some of these community organizations are able to effectively support the communities to face this massive challenge?
So they've been part of what we constructed called Help Newham. It was a network of working with the voluntary sector and the faith communities. One of the instructions of government for every single local authority that went into an emergency response mode when the outbreak first emerged and the lockdown was announced was that there was an absolute need to respond to your most vulnerable residents. What I'm very proud of is that over and above what other local authorities did, we did a diagnostic through analysis of our community data and profile, and we identified a vulnerable cohort of some 26,000 residents, elderly people, people with underlying health conditions, households where there were children with needs, and we set up and established through our own community neighbourhoods, food distribution. We distributed some 230 tonnes of food throughout the pandemic. We have set up a prescription service with our pharmacists and local health partners. We have a huge issue with regards to no recourse to public fund families, and we've been feeding and supporting them. And we also knew that we were starting from a very low base. Previously, prior to me stepping into office, the voluntary sector, the civil society had been decimated. What we passed in the budget in March earlier this year was a capacity building fund for the voluntary sector. And had COVID-19 not hit, that would have been accelerated, and that's going to now flow through. We have changed the way we commission, and that will enable us to help build and reconstruct civil society that is so much needed, and with demonstrable effect and impact showed during the first wave. The civil society, faith communities, faith groups, community leaders, all of us, all those voices matter, because we cannot do it alone.
So almost a third of Neham's populations are Muslim, and mosque plays an important role. So we've got Asif Chaudhary, a trustee of Forest Gate Mosque. Asif, you had a question to put to the mayor.
Yes, no. So once again, thank you for inviting me onto the show. I'd like to just start off by just commending Mayor Rukhsana and her team for leading the borough. It was a much needed change for Newham, and I've born and brought up in Newham, so I know the kind of drama that was happening in Newham. So this was a much needed change. So thank you for that. I commend Mayor Rukhsana for that. Now the question, obviously, being a trustee of a mosque in Newham, our main priority, I guess, lies with the people who attend the congregation. Now, as has already been mentioned, Newham has recorded the second highest infection and death rates, right? Only behind Redbridge. Now, that's obviously worrying for the ill, for example, with underlying health conditions, the elderly, many of whom attend the masjid, and obviously the BME population. Again, we're talking huge numbers here. Now, the first part of the question was that what is Newham kind of doing to counter that, to kind of bring that infection rate down, to make it safer for our elderly who for a good portion of the year were unable to attend the mosque. It's almost like, because I think one thing we have to understand with the elderly is that the mosque isn't just a place of worship for them. It's actually a place, it's like a community hub for them. They come, they meet their friends. It's almost like a get together with people of their own age. So it's like a much needed place for them. So my first part of the question is, what is the council doing to kind of counter that rise in infection? And the second part to that question is that recently my son was off school, and he was only going to be allowed in if we could arrange a test to be done. Now, the only way to get a test done is obviously you've got to go online. It became impossible to arrange a test. Now, again, how can the mayor assist with that as well, especially with, I guess, the kids who are, for example, my son was in year 11, he had to miss a week of school because that was just a condition. Now, how can the mayor assist with that as well?
Right.
Thank you very much, and Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for your kind words at the start, and two very important questions. So first, in terms of the community in Newham, and I very much appreciate and understand and am intimately involved in a number of different faith groups. We are a borough that is both multi-ethnic and multi-religious, and I absolutely recognise the important role that faith plays in so many of our residents' lives. We have a significant Muslim population, and what we did during the first wave of this pandemic, we worked very closely with the masjids because there was a real fear that there wouldn't be sufficient burial space for Muslims for the eventuality and the threat of high death rates that people were talking about at that time. Presently, the death rate tragically has reached some 312 individuals. It's increased by 4 over the last 4 weeks, which tragic though that is, alhamdulillah, not many more people have died. We have put in place really important measures in terms of care homes to support our elderly and vulnerable, but I know that a number of our elderly residents who are Muslim and from the South Asian diaspora and other communities live in multi-generational households. So a lot of our public messaging has been, how can we do this together? Because we have a role as a council, part of a London-wide effort. As soon as the pandemic emerged in the UK, the entire country went into a emergency response position, and what that means is no longer does a local authority determine singularly or individually what the response should be. It's a collective effort, and we work with all the 32 other London boroughs, making up the 33 in the capital. We work with the Mayor of London. There's all these systems and processes and procedures and escalation that's in place, but what our public health team have been doing alongside different parts of the council is constant engagement with the faith communities, the Muslim community included, support through public health guidance with regards to mosques opening, and the government has set very clear guidance in terms of places of worship. Every single place of worship has a responsibility to demonstrate and ensure that it's COVID-19 secure. So we've been providing guidance, risk assessments, and that advice that is much well needed. And in addition to that, that's been combined with those important communication messages around what you need to be doing to support those vulnerable residents. And we've been particularly concerned about residents who may be isolated, because you're right, the masjid is a place of communal gathering, not just for praying to Allah, to God, but also for coming together and being part of the community and the global ummah, and minimising the sense of isolation. So we've put in place, through working with the voluntary sector and the different faith communities, mechanisms through which we can maintain that contact.
Right.
Going to your, there was a second question in
We'll
relation
deal with that
to,
later on.
Yeah?
We've
Okay,
got that
fine.
coming up. We also have Atikur Rahman. Atik, you are involved with sports, and you have a particular concern as to how certain sports provision is working at the moment. Do you want to ask a question? We are short of time, so please do make it precise.
Thanks for having me, and congratulations to the Mayor of Newham and your whole team for working hard throughout this COVID-19 hard time. As a sports club representative, I just want to know really, because as in our club, we have young, adult, and special vulnerable people as well. In this time, it's really hard for everyone just to maintain their normal life, which is really affecting their social and physical life as well. So I just want to know really why Newham is so behind to opening all those laser center and the sports activities. Especially, we just started our badminton session from yesterday. We went to the Newham Laser Center, and they're not following the Badminton England rules. So, and where the other, especially the private sector, they're following the Badminton England Phase 3 rules. So I want to know really when, like, all those sports center can go back to normal, and when they can start just back to their regular activities again.
So we're not going to be back to normal anytime soon, and I think we've got to be very honest and frank about that. We are going to need to live with the challenge of COVID-19 living for a considerable period of time, even once a vaccine is found, and we're all of needing to make adjustments. Now, there is an approach adopted by private sport venues and gyms, and they have to adhere absolutely diligently with the government guidance and rules with regards to ensuring that their venues and their gyms and their badminton courts are all COVID-19 secure. With regards to the council, we have to take an additional kind of level of diligence with regards to our venues, and part of that diligence is around protecting our staff as well as protecting members of the public. We assess the situation. We are nowhere near business as normal, business as usual. Yes, our community centres are open, our libraries, but it's very much constrained. We limit the number of people that come in and come out. When the first wave pandemic happened, we literally, within 2 days, instructed every single member of staff to work from home. And we were able to maintain an emergency critical services only, because that was the requirement by government. As government has eased, we've made assessments based on the London plan. So we follow a London-wide plan relating to the level of risk and risk mitigation here in London. So Newham has made a decision based on a very expert assessment, which is predicated on advice by a public health team, and that will be the reason why the badminton courts and the leisure facilities that we run as a public authority with a public duty to adhere and maintain public safety in the context of this public health emergency that is facing us, apply a much rigour to what we're doing.
Thank you. I think that was I'm sorry, but we are running short of time, so we need to move on. You are watching The Conversation with me, Talha Ahmed. We will take a short break, and after that we will explore some of the other issues. In particular, we'll be looking at the challenges posed by housing situation, education and young people, and hopefully we would also have some time to finish off looking more closely at the issues of health and provisions within the borough to keep you safe. So until then, do stay with us. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. You are watching The Conversation with me, Talha Ahmed. Today we are discussing COVID situation in Newham. In particular, we're looking at the impact of COVID-19 and what has the response been from the local authority primarily, but also we heard and we will hear from people who are involved in business, in community activities, in sports organization and we'll hear from them their concerns and what the impact has been. Before the break, we had a general discussion about COVID-19 and its impact. But in this segment, we will try to focus particularly on housing, education and young people. And hopefully we'll get time to look at health provisions, healthcare provisions, and how you can remain safe at this very testing of times. Just to remind you, if you cannot continue watching this program on Sky 781, you can watch it live on Facebook, TV1 UK, our page TV1 UK, you can watch it. Also your friends and family who don't have Sky or they don't live in Brittany, you can invite them to watch this program online on our Facebook page now or at a time convenient to you. This program will be available after at your as and when you want to watch it. Right. So, Ruxana, we were talking about earlier briefly about housing. I just want to briefly understand from you what have you done to ensure that all those people who lived in overcrowded housing, many there's serious rough sleeping and homelessness challenge as well. Have you done anything particular to keep them safe?
What, during COVID-19
yes,
or more
yes.
generally? So
COVID-19. Obviously, you've been doing lots of things generally.
So, I mean, obviously there's a particularly acute housing crisis in Newham, and in the context of our homelessness community, we came into office with no homelessness strategy, which we have been building up with a very clear, robust evidence base. We knew that we would have a real issue with regards to families living in temporary accommodation, particularly where there was no, there was no division between different households, and there was access only to communal kitchens, and that was a real health risk. So we essentially rehoused on a temporary basis during that first wave pandemic, and they're still in place presently. All of our temporary household families with children in hotels, and similarly following a requirement by government, and we were very concerned in terms of our rough sleeping community. All of our rough sleeping community were housed in hotel accommodation, and that was a collaborative effort with the Greater London Authority, the Mayor of London.
Is it still continuing at the
moment? So it's presently continuing. We're waiting for government to provide further guidance, because the pressure on council resourcing has been significant. We earlier this evening I was at a formal cabinet meeting where we presented our budget position in month 5 of this financial year, and we've analysed and calculated a £20 million additional funding pressure as a consequence of COVID-19, and this is on top of the £45 million savings that we are required to achieve for the next 3 years. But in terms of those households in temporary accommodation without that access to self-contained units and our rough sleeping community, we had ensured that they were part of our high-level first target priority vulnerable group that we looked after. So we looked after all of those elderly residents with underlying health conditions, residents with 2 or more comorbidities in terms of health vulnerabilities, the no recourse to public fund families, and also our rough sleepers.
Right. One of the other concerns, I think your own estimate is that as many as 40,000 residents in Newham could be at risk of losing their job or their job being significantly changing. And so employment is a serious concern, as well as viability of local businesses. So how have you sought to support job retention? There's not much you can do beyond your borough, but in terms of supporting businesses locally, what have you done to make sure that as many of those jobs as possible you could retain?
So I think it's really important to recognise that we're in the early stages of a recession. The OECD has made it really clear, as has the International Monetary Fund, the UK economy is going to be severely impacted more than any of the other G20 countries. We know that as a consequence of the characteristics of the UK economy, which was in any case going through a period of wage stagnation compounded by austerity, the lack of investment in terms of public pumping in money has been really profound.
Not to mention the Brexit uncertainty.
And all the Brexit uncertainty. And Newham, you are right, we are severely impacted by the economic features of COVID-19. We've already undertaken analysis. It was one of the things that we began to do very early on. We analysed the ONS data in terms of claimant count. We've got the highest number of residents on furlough. We know that the economic impact is going to be severe. Our analysis and our forecasting suggests and points to some 103,000 plus residents. That's more than Tower Hamlets, more than Hackney, more than Westminster, Chelsea and Kingston combined will be facing unemployment for a period. We also know the impact of COVID-19 on the entire London economy, not just Newham, is going to be significant for a period of time. There will be no jobs for us to reroute.
So what are you doing? I mean, the question is, what are you doing?
We are going to need to, one, ensure that the government has a return to work programme. You know, this is not something that local government can do itself. We have already launched our COVID-19 recovery and reorientation strategy, and it builds on what we were pursuing prior to COVID-19, and that's about how do we address long-term features of poverty and inequality. And we know this. We have some 36,000 residents in Newham, before COVID this is, who were weren't even being paid the legally required national minimum wage, let alone the London living wage. That's a feature of exploitation in our labour market, in the black economy. We asserted a very clear position that we would be an advocate for workers and employees' rights. We are also knowing that the local business community and the big businesses were going to be very hard hit. We have the characteristics of a local economy where sectors have all been hit, not only in Newham. So we have retail sector, construction sector, food, culture, arts. What we have done through our COVID-19 recovery strategy is launch an approach. The action plan is going to be published in the next in the coming month, and we have announced first in July a £13 million good growth fund. We distributed through passporting money that the government gave us to help businesses nearly over £600 million plus. We had a discretionary fund of about £2.5 million that we've distributed to small businesses that didn't qualify for the government scheme. We have instituted the Kickstart programme to help young people. We've set out an 8-pillar recovery strategy, which at its heart is about ensuring that we measure our economic success through the health, well-being and happiness of our residents. We know the next 6 to 12 months, there may not be jobs. How do we ensure that we support residents nonetheless through either rerouting them through, for a period to other things that they can do, getting them trained, getting them ready, having discussions with some of our big, institutions, the health service, they're going to be looking for people to come and work, and how we can support our young people. The analysis and the data from all the leading academics and expert institutions, including the OECD, have said women and young people are going to be particularly affected. Today at Cabinet, we presented a paper and we've approved the establishment of a £500,000 youth empowerment fund that any young person
I'm going to stop
access.
you for a moment. We've got Mr. Ansar from Impression Events Venue. Events venues are probably one of the hardest hit areas. Ansar, you have a particular concern. Do you want to say it?
Yes, thank you very much. Good evening to you, our guest, Rukhsana Faiz, Mayor of Newham, and all the viewers of TV1. Thank you very much for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to ask this specific question to our Honourable Mayor. There's one or two things that I wanted to address, especially in regards to my business. There are a few facts that I need to basically address.
You need to be very quick, my brother, because we are short of time.
I'm going to do my level best to be very quick and thingy. Right, okay. Number one, my business, yearly rent on my business is £150,000. I'm actually at this moment in time, I'm 2 quarters rent overdue, and another quarter is almost going to be due by end of this month. Yearly, I pay my rateable value on my business is £191,000, and yearly I pay £101,000 business rates. I've been operating for the past 12 years, and I have contributed in terms of within the business rates over £1 million to the local authority. Right. What I want to ask, because my rateable value is greater than the threshold which was a guideline given by the government to receive grant. I did not receive that because I was over the threshold. Therefore, I did not even get a single penny support from the local authority or the central government. What I want to ask our Honourable Mayor is, for businesses like ourselves to sustain, is there anything that the local authority is able to do, support us financially, so that at least we can sustain our business for the time being, and maybe provide support and provide a service to the local and the wider community people within Newham and across the neighbouring boroughs as well. Also, if restaurants or pubs are able to open, maintaining social distance, where many restaurants I have personally observed and seen that they have more than 100 guests in a place. My venue can accommodate up over 500 people, but maintaining social distance, why is it that we cannot open our business to the public so that at least we can sustain ourselves and stay in business rather than get bankrupt?
Thank you.
So what support is the local authority able to give it to us? I do know that you're going to say the local...
No, I think that's okay. Let her answer it. If she is constrained, I'm sure she can say it.
Thank you very much. Really important set of questions, and I absolutely feel your pain. I come from a household, a family background where we similarly, my father, my uncle, my brothers run businesses, and it has been very hard for my brother and my uncles, and the friends network, and the things that I would say, local government doesn't set business rates. It's a national regime, and I know that Newham's been lobbying alongside other local authorities because it is crippling local businesses, particularly against the backdrop pre-COVID of the decline of high streets. And I think actually, counterintuitively, because of COVID, there may, we believe there's an opportunity for us to revive our local high streets and small businesses and help support. Now, absolutely, the regime that was put in place by national government in terms of the threshold applicable for people to apply for the grants clearly wasn't applicable to your business, and we were given a small amount in terms of a discretionary award, £2.5 million. We've set up a business help desk, and I would encourage you to contact them, and feel free through the studio to be agreeable for your contact details to be provided to me, and I'll get officers to speak with you direct. So that's something concrete that I can leave with you today. In relation to the issues that you've raised, you've looked at restaurants and you've observed and seen restaurants where they are accommodating 100 people or thereabouts. Every single local authority is required to follow government laid down guidance. Government has made it clear that previously, prior to the announcement by Boris Johnson 2 weeks ago, up to 30 people could congregate for receptions, but that's not permissible now. You cannot congregate beyond 15 people, and unfortunately it is going to impact the banqueting sector and businesses such as yours. If you are concerned, and rightly, a restaurant that's got 100 people not demonstrating COVID secure provision in place, that is then a role for the local authority concerned, and if it is in Newham, then you should be reporting that to the council, and then we can undertake our enforcement and assessment in line with the public health requirements that we are supporting the police to enforce. Now, in terms of supporting businesses through this very difficult time, we are open to speaking with every single business in this borough. We have regular communications going out to all of them. We provide advice. We hold Zoom chats and webinars and calls about what it is that we can be doing and what we can be lobbying. But we are also constrained by what the government is providing and what the government is saying around guidance and what can be open, what can't be open.
Thank you. We're going to take a question from Syed Islam as well. I'm mindful of the time, and so I would like to very much take it. Syed, could you if you could just go to the heart of your question. You've got a question about, as I understand, how various cricket matches are being operated. Syed.
Sorry, my time is very short, but I do have to address it's although it's not related to financial or money.
Straight.
Hello?
Yeah, just go straight to the question. Don't worry about interaction.
Yes, sorry, I have to portray the scenario. So basically, the lockdown initiated from March 21st until July, and recreational cricket was allowed from 11th of July. But Newham had the significantly highest number of illegal cricket played between in the month of April, May, and June. When I say illegal cricket, it means ECB and government didn't allow the recreational cricket to be, started more than 6 people. July 11 was the first time where we were allowed to play cricket. But we as a league, Essex County Cricket League, we have 26 clubs. 2 of the clubs are based in Newham. We have to really police on every club members to ensure that no one is participating in those illegal cricket. We even, wrote emails to every club that if anyone get caught, people will be reprimanded. So at the moment, the situation is we may go to another phase of lockdown, but it's very, very difficult to stop the boys, the adults and young children to play cricket at West Ham Park and other areas of Newham. So my question to the mayor is, how are you going to police if we go through another lockdown, and how we can control? And the last thing we want is that ECB and Essex Cricket and our league, we get reprimanded for any illegal activities, meaning illegal cricket. So that was my question, really. I had relevant other stories, but
if we have time, we'll come back.
Thank you very much. Firstly, can I just say how commendable the League has been in terms of issuing the instructions to all the clubs, including the 2 that operate in Newham, about the absolute importance of adhering to the COVID-19 public health guidance and the restrictions in place. In terms of the illegal cricketing and the sports that you've observed, it's absolutely critical that we work as a one unified community to make that socially unacceptable, because people are putting lives at risk. It's as simple as that. The local authority does not have enforcement powers. That lies with the police. The government has made it clear. We have criticised national government about the inability of us being able to enforce despite the fact that the government keeps on throwing more and more things for local government to do. We've pressed the Mayor of London to ensure that police is more visible in our parks and on our streets, and ensuring that people comply. Ultimately, it is a whole community approach and responsibility for us all to make it socially unacceptable for these things to happen. To hear from you that adults that really should know better are exposing themselves and other adults and young people and putting them at risk with regards to a pandemic in a place like Newham, with everything that we know about Newham, is something that really, really needs to be challenged by all of us through enforcement by the police. Please do, if you've got specific details, contact me and let me know, and I will ask the Borough Commander to look into this, and I will also ensure that our Parks team are keeping vigilant about this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got very limited time, and I want to explore this issue if possible. We talked about schools and children before. We've got huge issues around it. One, children are going back to school in a very difficult circumstance. Also, a lot of children would find themselves at home, maybe because parents don't want to send them, concerned, but also maybe because they're required to isolate. And so a lot of children's learning would be disrupted. What specific measures Newham is doing to make sure that these children, especially those who come from particularly disadvantaged background, do not miss out in a huge way? They will miss out, unfortunately. But what measures is put in place to reduce the impact that it might have on the learning?
So when I stepped into office, I made it really, really clear that our intention and our ambition was to make Newham the best place in the world for a child and young person to grow.
And some of the institutions are.
And we were really concerned about the vulnerabilities facing young people during the lockdown period. It's not easy for all of our kids to have ready access to devices to do their homework. Heart-wrenching stories of households, single parents, 5 kids using their mother's phone in turn to do homework. The government delayed in its, following its announcement that it was going to give local authorities money for computers, us repurposing old computers to distribute them. We've done a huge amount of work with our schools, and it must be really stated very clearly that our schools have been commendable in all the work that they did during lockdown and during the summer months. No rest, no respite, in order to get schools ready and secure, safe. I had very grave misgivings about the opening of schools so rapidly and so soon without all the other assurance measures. We are where we are because of the government's so-called strategy, where it wanted to open up the economy, and we knew that that would lead to an uptick in COVID-19 cases. We've been working with schools around a COVID-19 recovery curriculum, where the emphasis in the first few months, because kids have been out of school, and we know through some of the high-level research, we've got one of the world's leading experts working in Newham to help us shape with our schools, our recovery curriculum, the health and well-being and the trauma that young people will have been carrying. And for those most vulnerable, We have been making sure that we have our officers keeping an eye on those vulnerable families, that we're checking in. We've been particularly concerned about families with children with special educational needs, because it's been very difficult for them to stay at home, albeit it was permissible for them to go to school, but some parents were very scared. We made it clear that we wouldn't penalise parents if they didn't want to send their kids to school, but we would check up, because we've got a public legal duty around safeguarding. This is an important point.
Okay.
We need to recognise in Newham that we have put in some of the most significant measures over and above what any other local authority would do, because we are passionate about ensuring that our children are enabled to be their best, and we recognise the impact of COVID-19 will be great. So we're monitoring it. We've got a COVID-19 recovery curriculum in place that schools are following. We're working closely with our schools. 84% of our school children population are back at school. There's a problem with the guidance. I think arguably the year bubbles are problematic, because you've got a whole year group being taken out if one child is tested positive. So presently the position in Newham is some 4,000 children are currently isolated, not because 4,000 children have got COVID-19, but
because of the guidelines they have to.
Guidelines. So we are very concerned, and we know that we've got to continue supporting schools. And in addition to supporting schools during the school day and during the school week, we've also accelerated our provision through our Youth Empowerment Division. We switched everything online. We have...
So sorry, let me interrupt you. What I'm interested on is, obviously all of it matters, but we have to make choices given the time.
Yeah.
You mentioned there are up to 4,000 children who are off school having to isolate. So parents who find themselves in that position, what can they do to support while their children are at home?
Yeah.
What can they do to support learning? Is there provisions that council or the schools are expected to make?
The school community should be working very, very closely with the parent community of that school to provide guidance. They are required to maintain that provision for any child that is isolating. And we keep regular check-ins with schools through our school forums, with the primary schools and the secondary schools. We monitor where, what the case position is in each school, and we're in constant contact with all the school heads and the principal leads around the COVID-19 response. So it's absolutely an issue that we take very seriously.
We are already over our time, but finally I want to ask you, what message, if you really in 30 seconds put a message to what people should do who are watching in order to keep them safe, their families safe and the community safe, what would you say to them?
I would absolutely urge you, please, please, please maintain those really important public health messages. Social distance, wear a mask when you're out and about, keep your hands washed regularly, frequently, 20 seconds. Make sure that you keep a check on vulnerable residents or family members that you know. If you live in a multi-generational household, please, please, please be mindful about guests and friends coming in and mixing. I know that there's a rule of 6, but what I'm particularly concerned about is too many households mixing too frequently during the day, and that will increase the transmission of COVID-19 here in Newham. If we work together, we can keep transmission rates low and we can avoid untimely death. Thank you.
You're watching The Conversation, and our time is not almost to the end. We have exceeded our time. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you very much to our guest for giving up our time. You can watch this program on our Facebook page, TV1 UK. Until next week, that's all from us. Allah Hafiz.